All right,
Turn it up a little bit.
just up a little, okay. Is that better?
Too loud.
Too loud, okay. We have a little bit of a time crunch today. They have, as you can see, they've got a food drive that's going on. So we need to be packing up and out of here right around 10 o'clock. So we'll get this started real fast. We don't really have any announcements as far as things go. Our next club meeting will be the Christmas party, and that will be out at City Buffet in Roy, just off 1900 and about 5600 up there. Keep your eyes on the website. We have all the information there.
Hey Dave, I do have one quick announcement. We're gonna have a class in January. How about a tech class?
Okay, we're gonna do a tech class in January. We do one every January. We have it'll go on Wednesdays. We'll let you have more details on that. If you have friends or family that want to join in, let them know. I'll put that in some other newsletters like here at the school and other places. Craig Bradford had a real quick announcement. If we could get that.
Yeah, I'd just like to announce for the club that Ogden Valley is finally getting its act together. We have the new state president there, Lance Ulbrichtson, has gone ahead and made the callings, set us apart. So we're going to have basically 4 emergency communications coordinators up there, plus the director who will be me. And we'll be working toward all of this through the club. And I'd just like to thank the guys here from Aries and others who participated in putting up getting our repeaters back to life so that we can actually join the world. So we're on our way. Please be with us as we move.
Okay, that's great news. I will probably have a meeting with our Aries EC this week. We are, I was called into the principal's office last week. The SEC called me in and had a chat with me. But the end result was what I was hoping for. We are going to be working with an Aries group here in Weber County. So we will, when we get all those details worked out and everything, we'll get back with the rest of the club and those that are interested, and we will provide some trainings and other things that will happen through the area.
An exclamation point on that. We are literally having an emergency rapid damage assessment exercise in conjunction with the city and county on December the 7th for the Ogden, Utah State, which is up on the east bench just south of the river.
Okay, so there will be activities like that. We'll try and get those out on the calendar and whatnot, and let everybody know what's going on. Jay, you had something?
I do. I won't use that. This probably should go to the board, but I'm bringing it directly to the membership. Went to pick up a name tag this week, and the price of our name tags have gone from $10 to $15. We're only charging $2. It costs us $10.03 for a $12 name tag. The name tag, a single name tag now goes up to $16.09, our cost. I move that we raise the price of the name tag to $20. We've got to do something because we're losing money on paying name tags right now.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Second yours.
You want to take it from here?
Okay, so we have a motion to raise the price of the name tags. I know this isn't a great time to be raising prices on things, but as a club, we don't have really an income other than our memberships, and so
Val, when's the last time we've raised the name tag price?
We only did it once last year.
How about before that?
We haven't raised prices since 2004.
unfortunately, the way things are going with inflation and everything, we're being hit just like everybody else. So the motion's been made to raise the price of the tags to $20, and hopefully that'll last us for a while as we go through these changes. We're sorry to have to do that, but it looks like that's what's going on. We've had a second on that. Can we have a show of hands of who's in favor? Are there any opposed? Okay, we've got one opposed.
Just as a side tangent,
Just make it the cost of the actual item instead of raking in a couple extra dollars, is my suggestion.
Okay, so since we've had an opposed, we will take this up with the board in the next board meeting, but we see that we have widespread club support. Thank you for that. So we're okay? Okay. All right, thank you.
just a quick, last night we had to go to Costco, we wound up buying a hot dog, and if you noticed, but the Pepsi cups have gotten smaller.
Yeah, but everything's gotten smaller, everything's, you buy your box of cereal, the box has not changed size, the contents have. It happens all the time, unfortunately, in these kind of situations. If you remember that back when they came out with those king-size Snickers at the very first, they were one giant bar, and then they made them into two smaller bars, and then they were two of the vending-size bars, and anyway, it just kept changing size and kept getting smaller and smaller. King size turned into a regular size Snickers after a while.
And the prices went up.
And the prices continue to go up. It's unfortunate, that's where we are. We do have time in here now, I guess she's, Shannon's, Miss Seward's actually gotten us okay to be in here for the rest of the time. So we're good, we don't have a rush anymore.
So when is your out time?
Whenever you're done.
Okay.
So,
I thought you had, I don't know what your normal out time is.
we usually try for about an hour, and then it goes an hour and a half. Sometimes we're here a little bit longer, but we like to take care of business and everything, and then you can take as much time as you really need for the presentation. So, are there any more announcements? Oh, there's Winter Field Day. That's one announcement that's been brought up a couple times.
There you
How many are interested in Winter Field Day? All right, we've got a handful of hands. What I need is someone to head that. Is there anybody interested in taking the reins on that one? It was Gil that used to do that for us before, and he's moved up to Montana.
That's colder.
I'll send him an email and tell him he needs to get back down here to run Winter Field Day for us.
In the warm country.
So we need someone to head that up. If you're interested in heading up Winter Field Day, I'll talk with you and I'll give you as much help as I can on getting that organized. We do have a place where we can have it. We've done it there a couple of years now. It's out at the farm, my mother-in-law's property. There's plenty of room to bring RVs, that kind of thing, so you can park there, stay warm, spend 24 hours operating radio. There's the big field out there, which is now housing our repeater. And so there's plenty of room out there in the field for other antennas, all that kind of stuff. It's a great location, and we had pretty good success last year running radio out there for Winter Field Day. So if you're interested, let me know. We will try and get that organized and get it on the schedule for the club. Are there any other things?
I have some little cards here.
That's right.
Cards, and if you can, take one or two, put it in your wallet, and if you see a ham radio license plate in the parking lot, or you meet somebody, you can check license plate, IHOP, QSO, or other, but it has the club's website on it, and the other side. So if you're interested, take a couple, just to promote the club's website.
So, yeah, this is an eyeball QSO thing. It's kind of neat. When I work down in Lehigh, and when I go into the office, I work at home these days, but when I go into the office, there's always one or two license plates in the parking lot that are from ham radio operators. Operators I don't work with. They're visiting there at the Family Search Center down there, and they've got these. And sometimes I've wanted to actually put something like that under their window, their windshield wiper or something, to let them know I saw them. But one guy came out one day and I started talking with him, and he's part of the club down there in Utah County and pretty active on the radio. So he was fun to talk with. We've had a couple of them join our weekly nets. They have their radios on, they're listening to the repeaters, and they hear us out there and they join us for our little nets out there. It's fun. So if you want to partake in some cue ball, eyeball QSOs, cue ball ISOs, you can go ahead and grab a couple of those. And Kent, you also had
I'm not gonna do it, but if we've got a few extra minutes.
there's this I don't know how many of you are in the LDS church or whatever, it really doesn't matter. Every once in a while we get these projects where they say, oh, it's the adult version of the Pinewood Derby. And you're not restricted by the regular rules. And I've seen guys put those CO2 cartridges on them and ways to puncture those and send them flying. And those cars, they come off the ground and smash into the wall. It's awesome. Kent's got one here that he'd like to show for a minute.
I have not making contact. I put a propeller on an electric motor, and, I put a switch on the front, because on the track, they come up, and you put the cars down, and then the handle's released, they all go out at the same time, but I didn't want my motor running. So I put this little switch on. When it goes down, it starts. So that's just a curiosity. I made semi-finals, but the electrical engineer had a Arduino computer and a motor and a propeller from a drone pointing backwards. And it blinked, and then when it came solid, then you could release it. He won top prize. That's just an oddity, it's fun.
So that might be something. I know we have our show and tells in February and whatnot, so we might try something there and see if some other people can bring some of those type of things in and show us what they've done. Because in ham radio, we like to use Raspberry Pis and Arduinos and all that kind of stuff, but they have so many more uses, and they're so much more fun than just for ham radio things or other things. So you can use them for just about anything. That's a lot of fun. Okay, well, if there's nothing else from the club, we have Clint here from Utah SDR, and he's going to...
I had a question. How's it going, guys? My name's Tom May of 7J, and so I've been driving all night to get here. But one of the things that popped into my mind about amateur radio is that there's a lot of folks that are either part military, meaning they've retired out of military, or that they haven't been in the military at all. And when we communicate with people, we know that we've talked about radio etiquette and stuff like that. Well, then I started thinking to myself about Boy Scouts and how the Boy Scouts have like their mottos or rules and that, and so my idea was to somehow come up with some kind of thing that could be read before a club meeting or before an amateur radio net control event that would everybody could get to know, and I know that it's just plain and simple just to say, just everybody be respectful, that everybody has their own views and opinions on things in life, and sometimes, we get stuck into this, because even being like, Barney Five police on the radio is not good, and neither is being, curious of what net is this and breaking in and disturbing the net isn't quite respectful. So, I think it's time that, because of the fact of COVID and with the stress of anxiety and impatientness, we need to take a step back and think about, some characteristic traits that promote this hobby so that we don't have, the new amateurs leaving because everybody, is not happy, and the old amateurs leaving because these young guys don't know diddly squat. So, that's just my observation from the amateur radio community of different things that I've been listening to. Maybe I've listened to the wrong stuff, but that's what I've observed. So, that's what I'd like to see, is something like a good club motto or what?
So, yeah, and we do have on our schedule or on our list of things to go over in a club meeting. We have some things on repeater etiquette and radio etiquette and that kind of stuff. And we will have a presentation. We'll have someone prepare something, slideshow, everything, to go over a lot of that stuff, because that's something that we need on a regular basis. We get a lot of new members every year, and because we give them a free membership in the club for the first little bit of the year, they usually show up pretty good. It's when you start asking them for money that they stop coming. We'd like to keep that going. We'd like to have some educational classes and some other things available for people. That is on our list of things to do, and we will try and get to it. What we need on those kind of things is we need a little more club participation. I'd like to put a list of things together and send it out to the club members and see who would be willing to take some of those items. Because there's nothing that says we have to only do that on our club meeting Saturdays. We can do those at any time. Take a Wednesday night, Saturday, morning, something like that, and we can put something together with the club and have some of those classes and other trainings and stuff like that. So people will feel comfortable using the radio and other things. Because it is difficult for new members to get on. Some of the old timers, it seems, bark at them a little bit for them not knowing what they're supposed to do or say, and it's frustrating to everybody. So we want to help people feel comfortable as much as possible. So we will get to some of those things. I can talk with you a little bit later about some of your ideas, and we can go from there. So if there's nothing else in the club, we'll let Clint take over. He'll give us this great presentation. I think most of you have seen the Utah SDR antenna. It's out there by, what's the name of that place?
Promontory. On the way to Promontory Railroad.
Yeah, just up on the way to Promontory. Thiokol, that's the name of the place, just down the street from there. You can't miss it. This thing is what, 40 something?
I'll tell you.
Okay, he's gonna give us the details. It's great. Anyway, first time I saw it, I wasn't sure what it was, but it's pretty awesome.
All right. I think there's a switch to light the room slightly. Is that right? Whoever operated before probably. Oh, there we go. I can't hear it. I can't hear myself. Well, there's a little bit of delay. I think it's active cancellation. Anyway, let's see. Quick show of hands. How many have ever heard of the WebSDR or have ever used it? Okay. Okay. I want to. So, as he said, it's west of Corinne at what had been an abandoned HF research site. If you've driven toward Thiokol in the past, since the 70s, you would have seen something like that. This is the big beam antenna. There used to be a twin to the west of it, which fell down. This antenna, we'll talk about that in a moment. There were two 80-foot towers, we think. There might have been 60-footers, installed in about 1973, and apparently they were using it for research with data transmission on HF, probably with the U.S. military, because we've run across a few people who said, oh yes, I was in the Air Force, and when I was in the SAC bomber, we'd use the signal from this as one of the waypoints. Or other people would say as well, there used to be a 50 kilowatt transmitter here, and we used to send data. And of course, we don't know exactly what, but we did find the license, the NTIA permit, and they were allowed 5 megawatts ERP. And with this antenna, the best they could probably do would only be 200,000, 2 million watts ERP with this antenna here. But anyway, a lot of big stuff. So in around the 80s, the site was abandoned, but in late, just stayed doing nothing until 93. When they installed this antenna, this is actually the bigger antenna of the two, taller, and it was used for ionospheric research, or chirp sounder. Now, how many, if you've ever watched a waterfall display or just been listening to HF, you hear this, we used to call them twit, you hear twit, as the signal, just like somebody is spinning their VFO through. What that is there's a bunch of transmitters around the world. They're synchronized to GPS time these days, and they scan from 3 megahertz to 30 megahertz. They mute over certain frequencies. But what they do is they give you a 3D map of the ionosphere, real-time 3D map of the ionosphere. They're all over the world, and that's what one of these was. And this particular antenna is covers from 3 to 30 megahertz, pretty much continuously. It's an Omni. Well, in about '06, the tower and the beam fell, the west one. We're pretty sure that the dead man rotted and it fell over. And around '08, the funding for the chirp sounding research stopped. And so the site was abandoned. So when we got to the site in 2017, the door was open, but all the equipment was in there. It was full of mud and wasps and everything else. Fortunately, it was February, so the wasps weren't doing much. And so in late 2017, Michael became aware of the site, and we negotiated with the landowner, and he agreed to let us use the site. We have to have, some agreement, insurance and stuff we have to pay, as you can imagine, because towers can be dangerous. And what we were talking about when we were brainstorming this, we were thinking, what is the way we can make this useful to most people? And as you probably can imagine, a transmitter-capable site doesn't scale because you need a separate transmitter for everyone. And if you're transmitting multiple bands, you have to go through a lot of trouble. I mean, they do this on military ships, ships at sea, and it's a huge pain. It's really difficult to do. It's a really technical challenge problem, but receiving scales well. I mean, you have one receiver, you can send audio to however many places you like. And also, since that would benefit the greatest number of the people, we decided to go to a WebSDR system. Now, a lot of you may have used the KFS WebSDR in Half Moon Bay. That came online in 2014, maybe, I think 2015. And so I'd been aware of that for a couple of years, and it's like, well, that's a no-brainer. We'll just do that. Now, we had trouble getting internet out there, so as now, it takes 3 wireless hops to get there. It goes from the SDR site to the top of to Little Mountain, one of many little mountains, then to Corinne, then another hop to Perry, where it gets to the fiber. So we have to jump through a lot of hoops. So we managed to get the power back out there. Getting the power reconnected was a heck of a job. It used the 4160 line. If you're in power, you'd say 4160, nobody's used that since the 70s. It was obsolete in the 70s, but we managed to convince them to turn it back on. And we got an internet connection on the last day of February, and prior to that, it had been testing in Salt Lake at a very noisy location, but we knew everything worked, so we let it rip. And the antenna used for that was this Omni antenna. It's a TCI 530 omnidirectional log periodic antenna. Now, log periodic antennas aren't something that most hams see. They have a lot of elements, and they, big end toward the back, little end toward the front. And one of the things that I have not worked out in my brain is that the top part has the big elements and the bottom part has a little element. So you'd think that the antenna would be pointing at the ground. Not only that, there's 2 antennas that are phased in quadrature to each other. So on the, say, the east and west side, there's one set of it, there's one antenna, and then 90 degrees from it is another antenna. They kind of spiral as they go down. But with that, the magic, whatever happens there, means that this thing is omnidirectional, 92 feet tall with a 250-foot radius footprint. That sucker wouldn't even fit in my yard. And SWR is pretty decent. It's 2 to 1 or less from anywhere from 3 to 30 megahertz. And it actually works as decently as receive down to 400 kilohertz. So we are using it for 160 receive and also 630 meter receive. And yes, we do have ham bands below 160. And the polarization is mostly horizontal at higher angles, straight up, however that works. If you're pointing straight up, what's horizontal and vertical? I don't know, but it's mostly circular at lower angles, which means, I don't know if you know it, but once the ionosphere does its work, it doesn't matter what kind of antenna you had originally. You could be vertically or horizontally polarized. What the other guy receives after the first bounce is something. It randomly changes with something called Faraday rotation and the angle and everything else. But this antenna don't care. I mean, it sees either way, and it says, "Oh, I don't care, it doesn't take," you know. So what you do is you end up with a little more gain, because say if you have a vertical receive antenna, and the signal just happens to rotate horizontally because of the ionosphere doing its thing, then the signal fades out, even though it really doesn't. If you had a vertical next to it, you would say, oh, well, it's receiving this one. There's a thing called diversity reception that some radios are starting to have, like SDR Play, RSP Duo can take two separate receivers. And if you have one of those, put on your headphones in stereo mode, you can hear a weird effect. It sounds like everybody's in stereos. Things fade in and out from one ear to the other, even though your antennas are next to each other. But I digress. So it's a complicated maze of wires. Let's see. And there's lots and lots of wires. And this is sort of the diagram of how it looks. So these are the antennas, these are the wires for like, this wire is long enough for like 2.5 meg, and the wires down here for like 33 meg. And if you know how Yagis work, the reflector is 5% larger than the driven element, and the director is 5% shorter than the driven element. Log periodic antennas can be kind of thought of a bunch of Yagis and stacked, like bigger element, littler element, and the one behind it acts as a reflector for the one in front of it, and the one in front of it acts as the director for the one behind it. So, and of course that antenna looks like this. So this is the antenna a lot of people don't even notice, but it is in some ways it was originally the star of the show. As mentioned, 94 feet up here. There's the feed line comes down the side of the towers. There's about 350, 400 feet of inch and 5/8 heliax going out there, which has less than a dB loss of HF, so works pretty well. It's been struck by lightning several times, but it seems to be built for it. By the way, that antenna, I think if you were to buy it new and get one installed, it'd be about 200 grand. The antenna itself is like 80 or 90, and it costs about that much for somebody to install it. So I don't know what kind of budget they had for this when they installed it. How many of you ever knew Pete, K7ZTM? He was involved with this, but I knew him, but I didn't have anything to do with him. So if we could have a seance, we could probably find out more history of what this site was. But if you know more about this site, let me know, because we'd love to know. But the other antenna that people do notice is this sucker. It's a high gain, now US Antenna Products LP1002. You can still buy this antenna. We think this antenna was installed in 1973. The tower itself is 80 feet tall. Only 82 feet. And the way it's mounted, it's 82 feet above there. 1,400 pounds of mostly aluminum. That's me on the tower, by the way, reconnecting a feed line. The boom is only 64 feet long, and the longest element is 81 feet. And it covers from 6 to 40 megahertz, and the gain is 10 to 13 dBi. So what that also means is that the directivity is about 40 degrees wide. It's pointed pretty much due east, but which covers the US okay, but if you ever look at a world map, and by the way, it's not rotatable. By the way, on a shared site, if you had a rotatable antenna, how would you do it? You know, fight to the death? I don't know. Where would you point it if 100 people are using it? So the pattern of it looks more or less like this. It covers the US pretty well. The white part is where the gain is only down by 3 dB about, and where it turns magenta is about where it's down to unity. Now, one thing to remember is that the back of the antenna, it only has a front to back ratio of 10, 15 dB, so the back of the antenna has about the same amount of gain as the Omni does, maybe a bit less. So, yeah, so you can hear off the back of the antenna, but you hear in front of the antenna pretty well. And if you look at the map of the world, it's pretty much pointed right at Australia. I mean South Africa and Africa. But it also, if you extrapolate this, I need to update this, for a long path, it covers Australia and New Zealand, which is kind of interesting. If the band's open both along the short path, you go on the east antenna, you hear an echo. You go on the west antenna, you hear an echo. It's kind of cool. Now, this past year, this past summer, we installed yet another antenna. So Ham, WDA-ULD, I think, passed away in October, and his widow was kind enough to donate this other lot periodic that he had. It's 70 pounds. We mounted it 53 feet above the ground on the same tower, and it's a 30-foot boom length with 43-foot element, and it's a 30 to 10 meter antenna. It can't be as big. It was big enough. It was a real pain to get it up there. We used a 110-foot boom lift. Its gain is a bit lower. It's about 9 dBi, but we pointed that one more or less northwest, and it's not rotatable either. You can see it. We barely managed to clear the guy wires, which really don't interfere with it. And this pattern looks like this. We decided, well, we took a poll and just and asked people, where would you want another antenna pointed? And pretty much everybody said, we can hear, how about Asia, Pacific? Okay. So it's pointed at Asia, Pacific, New Zealand, Australia. And on long path, it covers reciprocally what the other one does. So between these two antennas, we cover both directions. Now, there are a ton of RF modules to handle all these receivers. Now, for the most part, these days, we are trying to use SDR Play RSP1A receivers. These are $125 a throw, roughly, and you can get them. But we had to write some drivers to work with this to make it look like a sound card. A sound card capable of 768 kilohertz of bandwidth. So and the other thing too is that if you have big antennas like this, and also just any digital receiver, you're gonna have to have pretty good filtering. Now these receivers have about a 14-bit A to D analog to digital converter, which is about the same as what's in the ICOM IC7300. If you run the math, you realize 14 bits, even 16 bits is not enough to hook it up to an HF antenna to work worth a darn. So you need to put a lot of filtering in front of it. You only filter the bands you want, which is why the 7610 has a Digicel thing and the 7300 has a ton of different filters in it. So pretty much all these filters, you can't go out and buy them. So these modules are kind of bespoke with lots and lots of winding of toroids and sweeping things. And plus, the AM broadcast stations come into that vertical antenna amazingly strong, even the log periodic. I mean, I put a power meter up to it. It's minus 10 dBm, which is a tenth of a milliwatt or 100 microwatts during the daytime. In most receivers, most ham receivers, I mean, that is like S80, I mean 80 over S9, something like that, just from the AM broadcast station. So if you put it this way, if you hook almost any HF radio up to this antenna, all you hear is Intermod on AM. So, yeah. So this is the first rack we had. We only had one server. We barely covered the bands. This is the one that went online. Since then, we've added more stuff. This is one of two racks. You know, the WebSDR is kind of like a repeater. People who haven't ever been to a repeater site might think this is gold gleaming box on top of a mountain that does wonderful things. Really, it's a dusty room full of flies and spiders, and you have to move stuff out of the way to get at anything. That's the way most mountain sites are. But you know, there's hundreds of cables connecting everything, literally. And currently at the SDR site, we have 5 servers, all covering HF. All the bands from, we have coverage on all bands from 2,200 meters ham bands through 2 meters. Don't cover all those bands. We don't cover all of 6 meters, for example. But we have 6 antennas and 34 receivers up there. not counting the Kiwi SDRs, we have 5 of those. I can talk about those later. But all those, that tankless stuff, you know, holds about 600 watts of power all the time, as you can imagine. We also cover a bunch of the shortwave broadcast bands. Also, we have a 6th server that's in Salt Lake. A friend's house, he had, you know, said, I don't know, I have this Linux computer on all the time. Just put the SDR software on it. So we plugged some RTL SDR dongles into it, connected it up to his disk code. So we have local coverage in Salt Lake on 6, 2 meters and 70 centimeters, plus some of the more popular air traffic control frequencies. And so, I mean, we decided, why the heck not? We can do that. Now, this system runs on Linux, you know, Debian or Ubuntu, and the software, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. The software isn't open source, which is kind of a bummer, but it's free for anyone who's serious about putting the system together. So if you wanted to write the guy who puts the software together, and I want to put a WebSDR, says, well, what do you have in mind that's better than what covers different than what is already out there? And if you give an answer you'll like, I say, sure, put it up. And you know, and you can get binaries for the PC and Raspberry Pi. Raspberry Pi can't handle very many receivers, even the 4, because it's nowhere near as powerful as even a fairly low-end computer. But the takeaway from this is you only need a device with a modern web browser to use the WebSDR. It could be a phone, a tablet, you know, real computer. So, now, if you go to the site websdr.org, you will see a list of all the active WebSDR sites in the world, listed in approximate order of busyness. I'm not sure what the magic algorithm is, but the most popular ones are near the top, and the least popular ones are near the bottom. And they cover literally from DC through 10 gigahertz. There are a bunch of, there's several of them in Europe that cover the, the QO100 satellite. So over Qatar and Amsat DL got together a couple $100,000 and put a transponder on a geostationary satellite to go up on 2 gig and come down on 10 gig. So the side of the world facing that part of the world can talk to everybody else. No, we can't see this over here because it's over the wrong part of the world. But you can see what's going on over there. You just can't get to it on some of these WebSDRs. Now this guy, he's a professor of University of Twente in the Netherlands, and they had access to a 25-meter radio telescope. And he thought, well, you know, people might be interested in what's going on here. So he hacked together pretty quickly, apparently, some software that just let people connect and you know, use JavaScript and all that to hear the audio from it. And he the ball kind of rolled a bit, and he actually came up with a WebSDR that's out there today. So there are 160 of these things around the world. There aren't any in Australia and Africa right now, but oddly there aren't any in Canada either, so that's weird. But most of them are in Europe and South America, as it turns out. A lot of them in Brazil for some reason. Now, every user has their own virtual receiver, and they're able to do whatever they want independently. So you get a waterfall, you can select your mode down here, you know, CW, AM, FM, whatever. You can select filtering and all that. And we can share it with a lot of people. Typically on a weekend morning, we see more than 200 people simultaneously on the WebSDR at the same time. That's about 12 megabits of outbound bandwidth, I think. Something like that. It's about 50, 60 kilobits per person. And they're all doing their own thing. I mean, they're all tuning, they're all on different servers. So, be thinking about this, and if you come up with another idea of what you would use a WebSDR for, or what you'd like to see it used for, mention it to me. A lot of people use it just as a general purpose receiver. You know, I often do. You know, rather than turn on my HF rig, frankly, the WebSDR sounds better than the tinny speaker coming out of my HF rig because I have good speakers on my computer. A lot of people, I think the most common use, or one of the most common uses, is people complain about noise in their QTH. Now, if you recall years ago, there's this thing everybody was scared of called broadband over power lines. You probably heard of that. Well, actually, we shot ourselves in the foot on that one by buying these cheap things, you know, with wall warts on them. Those are far worse than BPL ever would have been. And you'll probably have a dozen of those in your house making noise on all bands. I'm sure you do. If you don't, you just don't know about it. You haven't tried yet. So that's the thing. Power line noise is less of it. When people try to listen to HF at their house and they say, I can't hear anything, it's too noisy. The first thing I tell them is remember, most noise begins at home. Chances are there's this thing connected into your wires, and your wires are connected to your radios, so they are connected. Buzzing, hissing, whatever they do, the trash HF at your QTH. It's probably not your neighbors that you're hearing mostly. So there's hope. That means there's hope for you if you've tried to run HF and just heard trash. It's probably in your house somewhere. You can find it, you know. But if you can't or can't do it yet, then there's always a WebSDR. A lot of people don't have an HF receiver set up. That's fair enough. It's pretty easy to use. For spotting DX, surprising number of people use this. It's kind of interesting to see the users kind of glom on to where there's de-expeditions going on. I'll show you in a minute where you can see where other users are tuned. Now, one of the other reasons you might use a WebSDR is that it ain't where you are. On HF, even if it's only 50, 100 miles away, it not being where you are probably means it can hear things you can't. Classic example of this is like the Utah Beehive net. 40 meters in the daytime, if the guy isn't within 5 miles of you, he probably has to be, 150 miles away from you for you to hear him most of the time. Which is why we have net controls in Oregon for Utah net, because the guy in Oregon can hear everybody in Utah, but the guy in Utah can't hear everybody in Utah. So a lot of times, people listen on both the one in Half Moon Bay in California and in northern Utah to listen to the Beehive net and kind of have one in each ear. One interesting thing to do is you can do this to figure out how HF bands propagate. Like, I can hear this station at my house. Well, is he getting into the one in Pennsylvania? Is he getting into the one in California? Well, you can find out. If I transmit, can I get into California or Pennsylvania on this band? Well, you can find out.
What about Maui?
Maui, that's true, yeah.
Even further.
Yeah, we can get into that. One of the things that I find most fascinating with the WebSDR is if you have HF, you can use it to compare and test antennas. There's several features in it. What the heck just happened here? I wonder why it launched the browser. Okay. So if you go down below where it says audio recording, you can actually get a signal strength plot up here. So what I did was, at my house, I have two antennas. I have a multi-band vertical Butternet HF10B, and also my main antenna is a lazy loop, 250 feet circumference, that works on every band. So I was thinking, which one works better on 160? Well, what I did was I set up a CW carrier and plotted it. So I ran the lazy loop. It's 250 feet is not big enough for a full wave loop on 160. So I ran it as a top-hatted vertical. So here's the signal. When I ran that antenna as top-hatted vertical, I unkeyed, switched over to the butternut, and then switched back. And you can see, even though my house in West Jordan is only 70, 80 miles as the crow flies, this is kind of around sunset, so it probably wasn't the best time. Signals are going all over the map. But you can kind of see that the butternut is just slightly worse than the other antenna, this close, but not by a lot. So that answered the question: is it which is better? Well, the lazy loop is. Is it a good antenna? I don't know. I should have checked on more SDRs. Could be they're both terrible antennas. I don't know. But, I haven't had trouble working people on the 160 with it. So, or 630 or 200 meters. I use the same antenna for that. Now, the WebSDR has a ton of features on it. I mentioned earlier that you can select the mode. And you can also select bandwidth. If you want it wider or narrower, you can select one of these here. There's the waterfall. A lot of you are familiar with the waterfall. And what it is a visual representation of the spectrum that is coming over the radio. So this shows a receiver tuned to 3968 lower sideband. We know it's lower sideband because this mark here shows the carrier, the dial frequency, and the filter is below it, so we're receiving the stuff below it. So you can see the sound there. Most of it's around 500-600 hertz below it. So that's how it goes. Now, this WebSDR and several others have also things like noise reduction, squelch, and synchronous AM, which we can talk about or demonstrate later if you're interested. Another interesting feature is you can record off-air signals. One of the most useful things for this is to check your own transmit audio signal. Transmit recorded. One of the things I discovered a long time ago is that if you are talking and trying to listen to yourself, it tells you nothing about how badly your transmitter sounds. I don't know what it is about the human brain. First of all, you think your own voice sounds funny. And also, if you're trying to listen and transmit at the same time, you lose all sorts of judgment on how good or bad your transmitted signal sounds. Well, if you can record your signal and then play it back, you can actually hear if there's something wrong. If you sound tinny or whatever, or have RF. Somebody said you have RF or distortion in your audio. Well, you can find out. You can also help other people diagnose signals. Occasionally here's, on the round table, here's something that sounds terrible. And, so, well, what does it sound like? Well, you can send them a WAV file. Send them a WAV file. You might also record stuff for posterity, or whatever that means. If there's somebody, some net that you find interesting, you want to document, or if you hear some shenanigans going on, well, you can document it. So they get reported to whoever it is. Let's see. There's also on-screen tags here. You can click on one of these and go to a net. There's also some green ones you can set up on your own that are stored as cookies on your own computer. So if you have a favorite frequency net, you can go there too. Let's see here. And along the bottom of the screen, you can see who else is on the WebSDR. This is on WebSDR number 1, and you can see everybody who's the frequency they're tuned to. And you either see the name or call sign they put in, or you see the IP address. But anyway, so you can kind of get an idea of who's hanging around what frequency. Now, one of the questions people ask is, what browsers work? Now, pretty much every browser works except Internet Explorer, but if you're using Internet Explorer still, you really need to take a look at your life, because nothing works with Internet Explorer anymore. I would recommend Chrome or Firefox. Safari works if you're Apple. One of the things you have to do, though, on pretty much every browser now, is up in the upper corner. I should have probably put it on here. And just above the upper right corner of the waterfall, there's a button that says like Chrome Audio Start or Safari Audio Start or something like that. If you hear no audio, click on that button. There's a way in many browsers to go into and make it so you don't have to click that button. And there's some information on the web page on how you can set that. But you probably have to click a button to hear audio. There are some versions of Apple's I mean, Apple is terrible to deal with. They're on modern iPads and iPhones. Only Apple applications will continue to make audio when the screen goes to sleep. At last I heard. So there's no way around that. Your SOL. If you're using a new Apple device, you have to have the screen open all the time on an iPhone or iPad. So what is that? iOS 15? Is that right? The newest one? I don't know. I don't know an Apple. I have to. But I'm telling you right now, if you have a newer Apple device and the screen goes dark and audio stops, I can't help you and nobody can help you. Not even Netflix can just crack that one. They can't. Apple controls that, and they haven't let the leashes off it yet. Last I heard. But pretty much every other device will work fine if it goes to sleep. Now, I don't come across it here or mention it here, but there are actually two versions of the web page. The one you saw here is the main browser version. If you bring up a portable device like a phone, Android, Apple, whatever, or a tablet, it'll suggest you can use the mobile version. The mobile version of the WebSDR interface is stripped way down, and it was written back in 2014 when smartphones weren't very smart or powerful, and the screens are terrible. So nowadays, you can even on a normal phone like this, you can probably get away with running the full function browser on the screen. And so I would recommend you do that. But if you have with less bandwidth or whatever, or lower powered phone, the mobile version is fine, but you don't get very many features with it. And frankly, it's really hard to tune. What do you make it transmit? I mentioned before, you can scale receive, but you can't scale transmit. If you've ever tried to set up a remote station, you scratch your head over that one. How about a rotatable antenna? Well, if we have a rotatable antenna, where would we point it? Majority rules or something? I'm not sure. One thing we are looking at doing is we have another tower and permission to put it up, and if we can come up with another antenna, we might put up another fixed antenna pointed somewhere, maybe Europe. I have to figure out where to do, I have to figure out what would make sense. And if you also noticed, I didn't mention it yet, and I can bring it up on a demonstration. We have all these different antennas, but they're on different servers. So if you want to go to the Omni antenna, the yellow and the green server are all on the Omni. If you want to go to the one pointed east, the magenta one, the purple one, is everything on that's on the east side. If you want to go to the northwest, the one on the teal server, which is sort of a dark green, we're starting to run out of colors, is northwest. That's how you select antennas and bands. You go to a whole different server, all the receivers are connected to different stuff. Now you might ask, how the heck do we support this and all that? Well, the WebSDR is actually not associated with any ham club. If you're an accounting person, you realize the tax implications of running off donations, as we do, are totally different from a club. They're incompatible with a club. So we actually became a 501c3 because we actually justified it because we actually supply raw data on ionospheric propagation and noise levels, and also soon to be ionospheric path length and drift to the scientific community. So there are servers running up there collecting data essentially for free that produce a ton of data, mostly copying whisper signals, weak signal propagation recording. You've heard of those. One-way transmissions. Up there we have, about 20 some odd receivers listening on all bands, all HF bands, including 2200 and 630 meters, to whisper signals on GPS locked receivers. And that data is made available for anybody who looked at it, including researchers, for academic, honest-to-God research. And it is, if you've ever heard of HamSci, it's along the line of the ham scientific community. So we are actually legitimately providing data for scientific endeavors. And and we support it all by donation. And of course, however you But the one thing I should make it clear though, if you don't wish to donate or support the WebSDR, you're still more than welcome to use it. Some people don't want to, some people can't. It doesn't matter. We are grateful of everybody who does donate, support it in any way that they can. So, I brought up a lot of stuff. I guess we're ready for questions. Let's see how we time our way. We're right at 10 o'clock. So, you had a question. You were tapping my shoulder earlier.
Digital.
Okay. Now, the question he asked was, can I use this to receive digital modes on a presumably like FT8 and the like, or other modes? And the question is yes. But you have to jump through a little bit of hoops. So the thing is if you're using a web browser, the audio goes into the system of your whatever computer you're using, which means it comes out of the speaker. When I've done this sort of thing, there's a program called Virtual Audio Cable you can get. And there's a couple other like it. And it does what it says on the tin. Instead of going to the sound card, it goes to a virtual sound card. And what that means is you redirect your browser to that. And then you can connect that to your speakers. But you can also connect a program like WSJTX to that virtual sound card. So the low-tech way to do it, of course, is to hold a microphone up to your speaker and pick up the digital stuff, which works, but frankly is pretty terrible. A slightly less terrible way is to have another cable going out of your speaker into another sound card or in another computer. That'll work too, that's better. But you can actually use something like virtual audio cable to do that. Now, one of the things you gotta remember though is a lot of those modes, like FT8 and all that, are timing sensitive. So if your internet connection is a bit flaky, or you're dropping, audio is dropping out, it'll mess up the timing and you might not copy anything, but if your internet connection is pretty solid, then it works pretty well. The delay on the WebSDR on a decent connection is typically less than half second, and FT8, that's within the realm of FT8. And I do know of people, I get some correspondence from people who receive FT8 via the WebSDR at their house, but transmit from their house. And the reason is they're probably in an apartment or something and can't hear a darn thing because of all the noise, but they can get out okay. And that's a pretty common use case. People who live in an apartment or an HOA and have a nearly invisible antenna that hears mostly noise, but it can get out okay. So that's an excellent use case. Any other questions? Yes?
I just want to take a minute and thank you for all your efforts. I've been using the SDR almost since it came online, and it's so valuable. I just can't figure out how we operate without it. So thank you.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. Yeah, a lot of people are happy to see the WebSDR. We occasionally get people kind of, well, it's not a real radio. Well, a lot of people have remote stations. A lot of people have had remote stations, but in the past, I remember in the 80s, there were people with remote stations that either connected today through a VHF or via phone, leased line, somewhere around here. So remote stations are nothing new. It's just easier than ever before and better than it was. And the fact that we can share this with 200 plus people at a time is ideal. Let's see here. Any other questions? Technical questions or anything like that? Any ideas or questions on how it works or how to do something? Yes.
On natural radio frequencies like 15 kilohertz to get lightning caused whistlers, have you thought of anything down that low?
Well, okay. The question is the really low frequencies, the VLF. VLF is 30 kilohertz to 3 kilohertz. ELF, I think, is 3 to, but anyway. We actually do have receivers that go that low. Okay, so there's a set of receivers called the QESDRs up there. And those are standalone WebSDRs. They can handle, the way we use them mostly for receiving whisper. I could probably bring one up if I can multitask here. But the Kiwis 1 through 3 are connected to a dual antenna system. For HF, they're connected, and up to above 400 kilohertz, they're connected to the big Omni vertical. But below that, there's a E-field whip up there that receives down to just a few kilohertz. And on that, you can actually hear the naval transmitted signals that are in the 20 kilohertz range and below that are used to communicate with submarines. And below that, you can occasionally hear whistlers. We're kind of near enough to a power line. In fact, we're connected to a power line, limits the capability of it. I have actually heard whistlers on the system up there that are unusually strong, but they have to be pretty good to get above the noise. So what whistlers are, what they're believed to be, they're called the dawn chorus, part of the dawn chorus. So the Earth has, the surface of the Earth and the ionosphere is sort of like having, you can consider the Earth to be a conductive ball, and then surrounded by another ball, the ionosphere, that is also conductive for radio waves. What they believe happens is that lightning somewhere on the planet causes it to ring like a bell, and since the high frequencies propagate slower than low frequencies, no, faster than the low frequencies, one of those two, what you end up hearing, instead of hearing a bing like this, you actually hear this sound as the thing goes around the Earth several times, and then the one set of frequencies fades out quicker than the lower frequencies. High frequencies fade out quicker than lower frequencies. So you can hear all these weird chirps and clicks and ghostly whisper sounds. And those have been known for 120 years. Those were first noticed, the first time that somebody hooked a cat whisker detector to a really long wire and some headphones, they noticed those things, 100 plus years ago. So, yes?
Glenn, how low frequency can you hear on the SDR TVs? Can you hear 8.9 kilohertz?
8.9 kilohertz, yeah.
Because there was some experimenters that were going across the ocean.
Okay, yeah, 8192 kilohertz. 8.192 kilohertz. Okay, what he's talking about is the fact that if you transmit below 9 kilohertz, you don't need a license to do anything. It takes a heck of an antenna, but it's not impossible. For example, years ago, there was a ham up in upstate New York, in Penn Yan, New York, and he got a Part 5 license. Dirty little secret. If you want to transmit on almost any frequency, apply for a Part 5 license. The FCC will probably say, okay, just as long as you don't interfere with anyone. So these hams got Part 5 experimental license, called like WX2 something. And they were transmitting on different frequencies, like 50 kilohertz and some more than that. There's a ham in Penn Yan, New York on 29 point something kilohertz. I was able to pick up his signal here in Utah. He was running QRSS 90, which means a DIT was 90 seconds long. So it took like an hour to send his call sign. But I was able to get a good, clear copy on that signal at 29 kilohertz. And what he's talking about is, well, about 8 kilohertz. Well, typically what they do is they put up a long wire on a kite, like 1,000 feet, bazillion volts through a transformer on it. So it's more like electrostatic, and they've crossed the ocean with that, between Europe and North America before. And the signals are super weak, you'd never hear them with your ear, but the computer doesn't care. It might take a day to copy a call sign, but it's possible. I don't know how sensitive it'll be because the power line noise goes up as you get farther below 15 kilohertz. The noise is high enough that we cannot quite hear the Russian alpha stations, but they've been so flaky recently because they don't pay I read an article that the Russian power company shuts off the Russian military transmitters because they haven't paid their power bill. So these things aren't running most of the time. Go figure. Any other questions? Yes.
So, I've been researching software-defined radios for quite some time. I mean, if you want to go really expensive, you go get a flex.
Right.
The K2s or K, or whatever, from Elcraft and that. And then there's like the AirSpy HF Discovery, the RTL SDR, then there's the Malachi. So between all those, now they're starting to come out with ones that have more bits per translation, and then there's also the quadrature sampling and direct sampling.
Okay, all right, so if you want to talk about the hierarchy of SDRs, relatively inexpensive. The cheapest is the RTL SDR. I didn't bring the dongle. It's a dongle about this big. It'll receive, first of all, the only one I would spend time on is the RTL SDR blog version 3. It's a silver one. They're typically if you can get them, they're in the $30 range. And they will receive HF directly, caveat, there's an asterisk there, and they will receive above about 40 megahertz up to about a gigahertz, another asterisk there. Those only have 8 bits of conversion, which means, what that really means is, for example, let's see, I think I can bring it up now, because I think I got my browser working. Let's see, do I have it? No, let's see, advanced. So, okay, let's try, there we go. So let's go to the sdrutah.org. So this is the landing page. You can see all the servers here. So, for example, the Salt Lake Metro one exclusively uses RTL SDRs. And we can see here, several repeaters are in use, 3 of them. What is that? That's 7.8, 6.2, and occasionally 7.0. Now these use an RTL SDR. The problem with those is that I actually had to crank the sensitivity of the receiver way down, because if you crank it high enough to see the noise, whenever a repeater keys up, it overloads the daylights out of it, because the difference between a strong repeater, the local repeater, and a weak signal is too much for just it to handle. So if you're going to use that for receiving multiple frequencies, you have to really jump through hoops. You can turn on an AGC if you like, but that means that it suddenly goes deaf when a signal keys up. So I had to figure out the right settings to make this work without pulling the rug out from any of it. So the RTL SDR and some of the cheaper FunCube and spies are only
AirSpy HF Discovery. Yeah.
right. Now you can get more than 8 bits. 14 bits, as I mentioned, is used in the ICOM 7300 and a few other radios, and that is good enough if you put good filtering in front of it. But that puts you into the like $100 class, $130 class of receiver, and the SDR plays do that. There's another one. Is that rough right class? I'm drawing a blank on it. But a lot of them. There's a lot of receivers out there that receive everything. Let me bring up a Kiwi SDR, for example. Kiwi SDR. There we go. Bring up this Kiwi SDR. The audio here. By the way, if you're running Firefox, you can mute the audio here. As an aside, and it's described on the webpage. I actually have my computer speakers on a relay, so when I key my radio at home, it mutes the speakers, so I don't have to turn them up all the time and hear the echo on the WebSDR. So this is the Kiwi SDR, and this is the whole spectrum from essentially DC through 30 megahertz. And, here's an ionosound right here, this diagonal line. It's sweeping up in frequency. That's what we used to have at the WebSDR side. So we can see right now what bands are open. We see a lot of signals here on CB, and a few on 10 meters, but we see the noise has come up around this here. So the best signals are from about 30 through 17 meters, all in one fell swoop. These horizontal flashes here are lightning strikes from who knows where. By the way, if you, just as an aside, you know, I can do show and tell, but I'll restrain myself. There's a site called Blitzortung, blitzortung.org. I think it's called, I think it roughly translates in German to lightning radar, I think. Let's go to the world. But it'll actually show you where the lightning storms are. So those static crashes we are seeing are either coming from the Caribbean or somewhere in Europe, probably. Who knew? Well, now you know.
So what is the Kiwi hardware? So is that the software is what that's called, is Kiwi? Or
Yeah, so the Kiwi SDR is a small standalone box. They're no longer made, unfortunately. Part shortages and all that. They came out in like 2015, 2016, but they handle up to 8 users, and we actually have most of the users are tied up. User slots are tied up receiving Whisper.
so is that still an 8-bit version?
It actually uses 14-bit. Now, we don't heavily advertise the Kiwi SDRs because, frankly, the WebSDRs do a better job of covering the HF bands. They're open for anybody to use, but we don't tout them because they're such a limited resource. We can have hundreds of people on the main WebSDR, but you know, some people use them for listening to shortwave broadcast or things that the other main receivers don't cover. But we do use them for whisper reception and noise analysis and everything like that. And here's another ionoson going on here. There's I'd have to look it up. There's actually a page, if you Google ionoson and real-time ionosphere, you can actually find real-time updated maps of the ionosphere showing your MUF, maximum usable frequency, and all that. You know, the maps are interesting to look at once you get your head around what they really show you. Let's see.
There was one more thing there.
Sure.
So like on some of them, like setting some of these SDRs up, the software will ask for you to calibrate it and then go to like WWD to make sure that it's receiving correctly. Is that a common issue sometimes that they don't always receive correctly on frequency?
Well, yeah, you can use WWV, or in this case, WWVB right here, 60 kilohertz. It's my watch and those quote atomic clocks are set to, at Fort Collins. Those are frequency references. So, you know, manufacturing differences and all that. You can count on WWV or these other signals to be accurate. And to answer your question, here are the frequencies. Here's what the spectrum looks like below. So right here, all these are megawatt-powered transmitters around the world communicating with submarines. They send it like 200 baud or something, which I guess is good enough, but that's all you're going to get when you're underwater. And finally, there's a few, interrupt me right now if you have any questions. Let's see here. One thing that the Utah SDR has that not all of them have are DSP noise reduction, and also a few things like CW peaking filters and notch filters. A lot of these features are found on modern radios, and we're actually trying to brainstorm ideas of things we can put on the WebSDR, add features, add to it, as long as the architecture allows us to do it. We also have synchronous AM reception. So if you're listening to a shortwave, one of the problems with AM reception is if your normal AM receiver requires that the carrier be present in the correct phase at the correct amplitude to prevent distortion of the reception. Which is why if you're listening to shortwave broadcasts, it fades out and gets all distorted and sounds terrible. However, if you radios that have selective synchronous AM, well, you know what the carrier is supposed to look like, so you can regenerate that carrier from scratch locally and reinsert it in the signal and fix a lot of sins. And this allows you to do that. It gets rid of most of the distortion you would hear on HF fading in and out. So that was added. The Kiwis also do that. And I think there's one other thing that I forgot what it was. But, any other questions before I let you go? All right, I think you'll all wake up now, and thank you for watching.
Well, I think excuse me, I think I speak for everybody when I say thank you. This was extremely informative. I've used it only very little, but I think I'll probably plug it in and on a computer that I just bought and take a look at it some more, because this is great information. You can see. I didn't realize you could see so much, but that's pretty cool. So let's give him an applause. So thank you. That's pretty dang awesome. I was going to ask you about the funding of it because I was curious, but you answered that question on there. Because that's got to cost quite a bit. You said you were pulling a lot of wattage out of that poor power line, and if you're doing internet up there, you've probably got what, an OC something up there, or
We actually have about 25 meg bandwidth.
so yeah, you've got a nice big line going up there.
Big enough, yes.
So that's not cheap. If you've ever worked with internet cabling and stuff like that, it's really expensive to have that stuff run. Right now in my neighborhood, just up the street here, they're putting in fiber. So I don't know why they chose to do it the way they did. They dug up our front yard, not the park strip out by the road, but our actual yard, to put the line through. Because apparently there's a slight easement that goes from the sidewalk into your yard that they can use. So they've done that. They've gone around our whole neighborhood. They're coming up and down this whole area up through here. So sooner or later we'll have fiber out here, which will be nice because that'll give us a little bit more bandwidth, but not quite what you're running. So.
Well, no, you'll have way more than we will.
Really?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. 25 meg is slow these days.
Oh, okay. I've been dealing with Comcast Business, and you want to try to avoid them, yeah. So thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and it's something useful. So now you can go hook that up and use another tool in your HF and other contacting. Thanks for coming.